Alright, and welcome back to another one of my Arc Knights videos. This one's going to be a little bit more controversial than usual. I don't usually make these kinds of tier list videos or anything like that, but given my previous video about Kernel Headhunting, I did want to address it at least high level. And today we're going to be talking about Kernel Locating, which is a Kernel Headhunting banner. But it at least lets you choose what operators are going to be rate up. Now, big, quick, important note is that it still gives you the same rates, and you can see in the rules tab before even selecting anything, the operators that are available for the selected rate up. And it does mention that it is going to be the same as any other standard banner. So do keep that in mind, in that whoever you choose as your rate ups are still only 0.5% rate up each. And the same goes with the joint operation banner that's going to be going on with Pinch Out Gaming. And so let's say you decide to choose Nightingale and Eyja. Each one is still only 0.5% chance on the rate up, plus whatever pity you get from the pity. That being said, is that if you were looking to purchase one of these operators, let's say Eyja, who does not come into the shop that often, then this is a great opportunity to put Eyja as your shop purchase and then outright purchase her with gold certs. Or for some reason you have a bunch of blue certs sitting around, you decided to roll one of the Kernel Headhunting banners already and you have the blue certs, then by all means go pick Eyja or whoever it is that you want as your shop operator and then purchase them directly. So this is a good opportunity to put at least one of these 12 into your shop and then outright purchase them. So, the Kernel Locating banner lets you select 2 6 stars, 3 5 stars, and one of the 6 stars will enter the shop, one of the 5 stars will enter the shop, just like a normal standard banner. And you're limited to these 12 operators, and it's the same for both selections. So here we go. And this is where it's going to be a little bit of a hot take, and this is going to be my personal opinion. Obviously, depending on your account, you might want to focus on different things versus what I tell you to focus on, or what I recommend you focus on. So, I'll be going over who I think are the top picks for each of these categories. So let's start with the 6 stars, because I'm assuming that's what most people are here to discuss anyway. And I've already rated them, I've already ranked them. Number 1, Saria. I still consider Saria one of the most OP units in the game, and there's a good reason for that. She has amazing stats. She, with the module, is providing 2 SP per heal. She has arts amplification for damage, and we do have a lot of solid arts damage dealers. I believe Viviana in the future is a strong arts damage dealer. We've got Eyja, we've got Cheobi, we've got Surtur, we've got a whole bunch of arts damage dealers now, and always have had a decent amount. And Saria just provides great opportunity for amplification of damage. She provides great coverage for heals. Healing defenders in general, I find, are a very overtuned class, and she stands way above at the pinnacle and has always been that way. So Saria is my number 1 pick. Obviously, that being said, if you don't have any DPS dealers, then someone like somebody else in this banner might be more relevant to you for a focus or for a shop operator. So I'll obviously keep that in mind. Number 2 is Nightingale. She's been, I wouldn't say key, but very nice to have for many, many, many events now. Her E2 form, giving you 2 dolls that have taunt and to bait range damage, has been very useful for many events, and I imagine will continue to be useful in the future. It's a very strong skill, whether you're in chapter 12 and you have these saw blade spawns, or if you're in whatever fighting Tallulah and you're dropping a doll down in front of the fireballs, it doesn't matter. Nightingale is quite a strong AoE healer, and is definitely a unique pickup from this banner. You're not going to be getting... There's not that many AoE healers in general, and her offering is extremely unique. Third, Eyja. I think that was a more obvious choice. Eyja is an incredibly strong caster, has been since her launch, her release, or the release of the game, really. She's been there forever. And has never really fallen off, particularly. She's just extremely simple to use, straightforward. S2 is just a good consistent damage dealer with a little bit of AoE aspect to it, and S3 is great for burst options. And yeah, so both skills have been used for ages. I would say particularly on the S3. But, and if you do watch any of my SSS guides, then you will see that I do use her quite a bit there. Number 4, we have the CEO, the Cheobi. Again, a strong damage dealer. And the reason one of the main reasons I rate the two casters so highly is because I find that the game doesn't give you great options for casters. There are better 4-star and 5-star options these days than there were in the past, especially going back a couple of years, where the non-Eyja, the non-Cheobi, and even Cheobi has her own quirks, but the non-Eyja casters were very finicky and quirky. And so we do have better options nowadays, but it doesn't mean that these two casters are any worse. So Cheobi is really good, especially against high defense enemies, high defense, low res enemies, or if you have a res debuff, then that helps as well, and it helps just put out a ton of damage. Number 5, we're gonna go with the Silver Ash. His burst potential is still not as good as Molinar and some other options. He's definitely fallen off in that regard, but he's still really useful for a faster burst deploy. So being able to position him in one place, burst, retreat, place him somewhere else, burst, retreat, and so on. So he's really good for that purpose as well, and he provides a team-wide redeployment buff. So everyone gets a little bit of a reduced redeployment time while Silver Ash is on the team. That is incredibly strong. So I still rate Silver Ash quite well. And there's some things that Molinar isn't going to deal as well with versus Silver Ash if you're talking about large AoE physical burst options. Molinar loses part of his attack every time he kills an enemy. So if you're dealing with a big wave of small little minions, I would say Silver Ash still has a bit of an edge there. Obviously, when you're talking about burst, you're probably looking at it more from a boss perspective. So yes, Molinar will win out most of the time. But Silver Ash still has that little bit of an edge if you're clearing out a huge wave at the same time. Maybe the boss is just in that wave and there's a ton of small little minions. Silver Ash can deal with that better than Molinar can. Next we have Ifrit. Ifrit, years ago it says everything is an Ifrit lane as long as you try hard enough. I think the idea of having an Ifrit lane has fallen off because we do have so many other options for arts, but it doesn't mean that she's a bad operator anymore. I think there's other priorities that you would want to focus on in this banner. So I'm putting Ifrit and Schwartz at the same level. So I put them 6 and 7. If Schwartz is 6, it's about the same for me. Both of them are great operators for either putting out a little bit of damage. Ifrit has a nice part about the res debuffs. So remember I mentioned with Cheobi, if the enemy doesn't have a lot of res, we do have great arts options, arts burst options these days. So having a res down could still be very valuable. Ifrit does cost a lot to put down. And her S3 means that she does deal damage to herself. So if you are using her S3 as a debuff, you do have to have that as a consideration. But otherwise, Ifrit even on S2 is able to hold lanes in certain cases. You have Ifrit lanes that appear, or you can cover, let's say, 3 lanes. You have 3 different entrances, and you can cover all of them at once with Ifrit. There's different utilities to Ifrit. And then going on to Schwartz, her S3 is still very powerful for dealing a lot of single target physical damage. It's on a very nice... I find that the rotation of Schwartz's S3 is quite nice, so you get it up quite often. And I still use Schwartz. I think Pawsey definitely has her beat a little bit, especially when you consider the typewriter for Pawsey. Pawsey's dealing quite a bit more, but Schwartz is still a solid physical damage dealer. And then we move on to Ak. I considered rating Ak higher, since on certain bosses you definitely do like to have those buffs. So Ak is a buffer, and first and foremost, you're probably going to be using him for his S3 and getting a strong DPS buff. So whether you're using it on Silver Ash, Surtur, or if you're using, let's say, Shining to cover one of your high ground units and then Ak buffing them, something of that sort, Ak can increase the DPS significantly. Chances are you'll see it more with Melinar, Silver Ash, Surtur these days, but doesn't mean that you can't do it with a high ground operator. And so Ak's buffs are very powerful for DPS. He does lose HP consistently over time, so it means that you either have to just drop him down, buff, retreat him, or you have to have a healer on him specifically, because there's a decent chance that if Ak doesn't have any targets to attack, he's just going to expire by himself. He just literally self-expires. Then we have Mostima. We're getting down to the bottom of the barrel here. At this point, I don't think the ratings don't really matter as much as just if you have everybody else in the banner, at this point, just pick who you want. Mostima, especially with the new module, has a very powerful slow. But before that module came out, she was probably one of the worst 6 stars in the game, having been used basically only once for some Caster Knights clear on CC4 and maybe some other Caster Knight stuff. But otherwise, for just general purpose, you probably have not really seen Mostima used. And even nowadays, I would say the only time people use her is for her S3 with that hyper buff slow. Then we have Magallan. So Magallan can be used for trust farming. Ling obviously is the preferred for summoner type clears. Doesn't mean Magallan's S3 is not strong. One of the nice things about Magallan is just being able to put down a drone that's invisible, dealing damage, retreating it, or recycling using her skills. And she still has a very powerful slow and bind mechanic with her S1. So being able to cover a large portion of the map, you can put down 3 drones. Herself in her own range with S1 is going to be able to bind. So you can really bind up and slow a huge portion of the map with Magallan's S1. So there's some value there. I wouldn't say it's a huge value, but there is some value. Depending on what type of player you are, you might see more value than others. She's there. I wouldn't say that I use her very much at all, but yeah. You have Rosa. I don't use Rosa very much. I've seen Rosa S2 in particular used because it has a very interesting uptime for a decent damage output. So I believe it's a 60-second uptime on S2, I believe. Anyway, her uptime on S2 is really high compared to a lot of the other physical damage dealers, where either you're cycling skills very often like Schwartz, so you have decent overall uptime, but it's like on off, or you just have one long burst of 30 seconds like Silver Ash, and then you're off for 60 seconds. So I have seen Rosa used for her interesting range, as well as just having a high uptime on that skill. And then otherwise, I don't really see S3 used all that much outside of Sniper Knights. And then you have the worst 6-star operator in the game, Siege. If you're particularly lazy and for some reason want to just stick an expensive Vanguard to do what most guards can do, but worse, then you have Siege. Yeah, she generates a little bit of DP at the same time. Fine, but there's so many Vanguard options these days. There's not much purpose to ever use Siege. Unless you're playing Vanguard Knights and you just want to use Siege's passive to buff everybody else out, or you're going to heli drop Siege with S3 and a bagpipe so that her S3 is up immediately and you just start bonking away at somebody with an RNG stun anyway. Alright, so that covers the 6 stars. Definitely I would prioritize Saria, Nightingale. If you're really lacking on burst or arts, then obviously the Eyja and the Sheobi are nice pickups to have as well. Let's move on to the 5 stars. We're going to go over this a bit more quickly. I'm not going to rank them particularly. I would just point out Tilo, Lapland, Spectre have been around since the beginning and have been extremely strong operators to own and have. I would recommend these as the main pickups. If you don't have any of them, put all three in and grab one of them. After that, we have Warfare, Gnarl, Texas, and Project Red. Project Red has definitely fallen off a lot, especially with Tex Alter. Texas Alter is just an insane power creep on the fast redeploy archetype. Takes over Project Red's role for the most part. But if you are missing Tex Alter, or I mean, yeah, you have to be missing Text Alter for Project Red to be particularly useful. Project Red, especially with just E1, skill level 7, has a nice 2-second stun on demand. And it's easier to pot 6, so it'll be a bit less expensive, a little less cooldown redeploy time versus Texas Alter. We have Gnarl. Gnarl is still valuable even if you're aiming for Saria, because as I mentioned, Saria can be used with S3, and healing defenders are particularly strong. I call them overtuned, and so Gnarl allows you to get have a dedicated healing defender even if you are bringing Saria for S3, where she's not going to have consistent healing uptime. So you'll use Gnarl where you would normally use, let's say, a Saria S1. Lapland has one of the longest silences in the game. Consistent silencing, decent arts damage with her S2 up. Otherwise, one of the main things that had made her fall off so much is just because in later chapters, everyone is silence immune, just about. So obviously we're in the middle of the SN rerun and everything is silenceable, just about. So Lapland stonks have gone up, obviously, for this event. And it shows why having a silence around is not that bad of a thing. Tilo gives an SP buff to everybody on the team, unless they're getting a stronger buff from somebody of their own class, like Suzerain's providing to supporters, Mossimus providing to casters, but otherwise, Tilo is providing that SP, that natural SP gain, and it's just overall a very consistent AoE healer. Spectre, very strong AoE guard. The passive self-heal is quite incredible to look at. Even if you have Spec Alter, the natural heal of Spectre will change how the timings work. If you need to use S2 for the zombie mode, whatever you want to call it, the immune to death mode. So because Spec Alter doesn't naturally heal and has to reset using her doll form, the normal Spectre can sit there tanking smaller hits for a longer period of time before having to pop the S2, whereas Spec Alter, you're gonna have to pop the S2 earlier and then switch into doll form. Texas is still a pretty consistent 2-block Vanguard. Nothing particularly wrong with her. Works as intended. Easy to raise. Has a nice stun. Works really well in IS3 because of that stun. Dropping those flying manta rays is always a consideration. So I do like picking up Texas for some of those purposes, in that in the worst case scenario I can still drop a manta ray, has good coverage, and at S2 M3 I think it's a 3-second stun. So quite a nice pickup, and just a consistent 2-block Vanguard. Even if you have to leave her behind a defender, leave her behind a guard, she can cover in front of the guard using her S2. And then otherwise, outside of that, you have most of the 5-stars are still good to have. So if you have all of those, I would say pick who you like more. Some considerations: Mayor, similar to Magallan, she's recycling her drones using S2 to recover them, and then causing some explosions. It's kind of fun. Manticore is quite nice for her S1 slow. I don't tend to use S2 as much. The micro stun is particular. I forgot to mention for Warfaren. Warfaren has a really just nice, consistent single target healing with S1. And otherwise with S2 is a very nice buff to have. It doesn't require you to do anything particular, especially when you're buffing a high ground unit. Ack, you have to cover that high ground unit with some kind of defense buff because of the damage that he deals to that unit while applying the buff. Warfarin, you don't really have that issue. You just pop your S2. It'll do a little bit of damage to each of them, but otherwise it's much more consistent, easier to land on the high ground units than Ack. And also, she provides SP when enemies in her range dies. So when enemies in her range die, she provides SP to one of the units in her range. So there's some, you may have seen some Saga Warfarin memes. And then, but otherwise, I would say it's nice to have. Really depends on the situation to make it consistent. Praminix is okay to have, or is nice to have, and Clifford is also nice to have. After that, it's very much who you like. So hopefully you found this useful. Just remember that the Kernel Headhunting is still the Kernel Locating is still a Kernel Headhunting banner, meaning that you are getting, as from my understanding, blue certs out of it. And pick who you like. Remember, the game is single player. Play at your own pace. Play on your own rule sets. If you want to use a full team of 6 stars, you can use a full team of 6 stars. If you want to limit yourself to 5 stars only, you can. Or Vanguards only, you can. The game is yours to play. There's no leaderboards. And don't feel pressured into having any particular units or anything like that. So, thanks for stopping by. I hope you found this informative. And otherwise, let me know in the comments how much you hated this video, because I didn't rate one of your favorite operators as highly as I should have. So thanks for stopping by, and till next time.